You're watching Lit Sports Online. This is a recap episode for the UFC Boston Reyes versus Weidman event. And jumping right into it, the first fight we're going to talk about is Joe Lauzon versus Jonathan Pearce. And this is one where Lauzon, Boston native, getting a little home octagon advantage, getting the first round knockout in this one.
Yeah, it was pretty brutal too. It was the one where he got his arm all twisted behind his head, and his face smushed into the mat, and Lauzon just pounded him out. Basically, once Lauzon got his hands on the guy, it was over. Lauzon's just a much better grappler, and he just had too much for Pearce to handle. So, easy victory from that point, really. It was pretty brutal, but also it was good to see Lauzon get a win. He's been in the UFC for forever, and he's at home. He was an underdog, so it's kind of a good, I don't know, a fun thing to see. And he might be retiring. He isn't sure. You know, there's been talk of him retiring for a while because, like I said, he's been around forever. He's not going to win a title, and he's been in some brutal fights. And so, if he does choose to go out, I can't imagine a better way to go out. Winning at home, first round KO in your hometown, like as an underdog.
Got to go out on a high note, you know. But that actually brings up an interesting topic that we may not have discussed before on this show, like the psychology of having like a home advantage in mixed martial arts. Is that really a thing? I mean, it's obviously a thing in other sports, and it plays into that with like away versus home records. But do you notice it seeming to really there being any advantage to having like being in your home city for a fight, or is that just like not matter?
I mean, I think traveling and screwing with your sleep schedule in any way, especially when you do international fights, for sure messes with people. I mean, it completely throws off your circadian rhythm, and it makes you more prone to concussions and all sorts of stuff when your sleep schedule is that messed up from traveling long distances. So there's something to be said for that, for sure. As far as being, you know, the octagon being in your hometown, like, I think you might be in a better mindset if you got to sleep in your own bed the night before as opposed to some fucking stupid hotel. And I think that some guys get away with, like, not to get away with it, but they enjoy being at home because their friends and family can be there. But some guys also find that to be more pressure. I've seen it go both ways. I don't think you could for sure say that is an advantage or a disadvantage. I think it's just another thing to consider.
Yeah, I mean, and obviously you would have more knowledge on this stuff than I would, but I would assume that if it's a fight situation that, let's say, because it's kind of like, I mean, it's not really the same thing, but you think about like pro wrestling, WWE. There's like a heel and a face. Like, I feel like to a certain extent, if it's the other guy's hometown, you can kind of feed off the negative energy from the crowd that's like booing you or whatever. Yeah. But you make a good point with the whole, like, if you have to travel from another country, obviously that part of it's going to mess you up.
Yeah, for sure. And I mean, that's even a big factor in football and everything. And pro wrestling is a whole different animal because those dudes do like 200 shows a year when they're in like the lower levels, you know. So those dudes are just screwed. They don't have a hometown, you know.
Yeah.
So.
And then the next fight we're going to talk about, this one turned out kind of interesting, huh? With Greg Hardy fighting UFC newcomer Ben Sasse. What would you tell us about this one?
It was an interesting fight. I thought it was, first off, Sasse is a tough dude. He kind of looks like Roy Nelson, you know. He's kind of a fat dude, has a mullet and everything, and hits hard for sure. He's way faster than I thought he was going to be. He looked pretty good, but Greg Hardy just looks better than he's ever looked before. You know, which is nothing less than you would expect from, you know, an NFL level athlete, right? You would expect him to be improving relatively quickly, and he is. His striking looks pretty good, but again, I think he kind of gets away with just being more athletic and everything. So I still think that once they throw him to the top of the division, he's going to have a tough time. And I think he just accepted a fight with Alexander Volkov because Junior Dos Santos dropped out. So in a couple weeks, he's going to be fighting again. It's a pretty big step up in competition for him. So I'm interested to see how he does. So the controversy with this fight was it got overturned because in between, I think, rounds 2 and 3, Greg Hardy used an inhaler, like an asthma inhaler. So that's albuterol, presumably, or something else. Usually it's a very mild steroid that helps with inflammation in your airways, right? But apparently you can't use that in between rounds. I personally have never seen anybody do anything outside of, you know, cut and injury management, as in Vaseline or a cold compress or ice and water. That's all I've ever seen. And this guy used an inhaler in between rounds. He said it's USADA approved, which is the governing drug testing agency. So he got the inhaler approved, but that doesn't mean he can use it during competition. Like somebody else said, you know, coffee is approved, even though it has a good amount of caffeine, but you can't use it in between rounds. You know, you're supposed to go in there and all you get is water. So the fight got overturned because it's a super gray area, I guess. I mean, to me, it's pretty easy.
So they don't really like label this as a performance-enhancing drug, do they? It's just kind of like not atypical for someone to use it during the competition.
Yeah, and it's nothing that.
So if he used it like before the fight started, they wouldn't have cared. It's because he did it between the rounds.
Yeah, it's just that it was inside of the competition. You know, it's you're only supposed to get water, and sometimes they let you do Gatorade, and that's it. And he used basically, you know, there's an official there, a athletic commission official, standing in the corner, and he looks at the official, and he's like, "Hey, can I use my inhaler?" And the guy's like, "Where is it?" He's like, "It's in my pocket." Or his coach had it or something, and the guy's like, "Are you allowed to?" And the guy goes, "It's USADA approved," and then just used it. And so he didn't really wait for the guy to tell him yes or no. The guy wasn't authorized to tell him yes or no, and I don't know. I guess you're just not supposed to use anything except for water and ice in between rounds. So the fight got overturned because he did something.
So is that like a no contest, or is he disqualified, like loses?
No, I think it was turned into a no contest. So it's not a win or a loss. Just it is what it is. It's crazy to me that like this dude who has such controversy coming in because of his personal life and his history, and just can't get, you know, then he comes in and I think he illegally kneed somebody in the head one time, and then he, you know, just had a lackluster win, and then he does this, and so it's every fight he has, there's some kind of dumb controversy going on. The dude just can't figure it out, you know.
Well, we'll see what happens to Greg Hardy from here.
Yeah.
As for the next fight, Yair Rodriguez against Jeremy Stephens ended in a decision. So, what's your take on this one?
So there was a little bit of kind of a grudge match going on, because the first time they were scheduled to fight, 15 seconds into the fight, Yair Rodriguez poked Jeremy Stephens in the eye, and the fight ended, right? This was a main event in Mexico City. Yair Rodriguez is real upset because it's his, you know, hometown, or home country at least, and, you know, he wanted to be the hometown hero, go out and win a big fight, but instead he fouled somebody. The fight ended right there, and Rodriguez is kind of a jerk about it, kind of talks shit to Jeremy Stephens about how he, you know, was a bitch for not fighting, and he's going to have to live with this. And he approached him in the lobby of the hotel with his family videotaping him, and antagonized him and all this stuff. So coming into this fight, there's a lot of animosity. And they're talking a lot of shit to each other. Jeremy Stephens is saying if Rodriguez doesn't die, it doesn't count, all this stuff. But when it comes to the actual fight, it kind of went the way I thought it might. Rodriguez was able to control the distance with his more diverse striking arsenal and his heavy kicks. He throws a ton of kicks. He throws a really wide variety of kicks because he has a traditional martial arts background. And Jeremy Stephens wasn't really able to close the distance and land enough big shots. He has a ton of power in his hands and his kicks and everything as well, but he's a little shorter of a dude, a little shorter reach, so he has to get on the inside of Rodriguez's heavy kicks. So it's not easy to do. And that's kind of how the first two rounds went. The third round, it looked like Yair Rodriguez was getting tired to me. And then Jeremy Stephens just put the pressure on. He's one of those guys who he's going in there to win any way possible, you know, and if he goes to his corner and they say, hey, you lost the last 2 rounds, if you don't finish in this round, you're not going to win this fight. He's going to go out there and do everything possible to finish the fight. And that's what he did. And so I thought Jeremy Stephens definitely won the 3rd round. And so the thing that's unfortunate about the situation after the fight is originally scheduled as a 5-round main event in Mexico City. Gets rescheduled as a 3-round co-main event in Boston. So when you see Rodriguez win the first 2 rounds and then Stephens take over pretty handily the 3rd round, you have to wonder what happens if they fight for 5 rounds. Does Yair have the gas tank to keep that going long enough to actually beat Stephens in the originally scheduled 5-round fight? Or did that eye poke kind of, you know, gyp Stephens out of a win? Who knows?
What would you say is the standard amount of rounds? Like, are there more 3-rounders or 5-rounders?
There's way more 3-rounders. Every fight is 3 rounds unless it's a main event or a championship fight in the UFC. Other divisions have different rules, but the UFC does it just because a 5-round fight is more exciting. It gives it a little more, you know, grandiose nature to that main event as opposed to the other ones, even if it's not a title fight. So it's way more 3-round fights. But since they were a main event in Mexico City, they would have been a 5-round fight. So it would be interesting to see what happened if it was a 5-round fight. But either way, Yair got the win, did it by controlling the distance, and the guys hugged it out afterwards, which was nice. You know, there was a lot of respect after the fight was over. So you could tell that it was like, okay, this situation was done. We both got heated, but they kept it going because they know, you know, animosity sells a fight.
Indeed it does. And so then that brings us to the main event of Dominic Reyes versus Chris Weidman. Weidman, of course, being the former middleweight champ, going up to light heavy for this. But it was Dominic Reyes that won the fight in a round 1 knockout.
Yep. It was unfortunate to see because I like Chris Weidman so much. I like his whole camp. You know, I love the Matt Serra, Ray Longo duo. Those guys are super entertaining. And I like a lot of guys in their camp. I really like Weidman. I like Aljamain Sterling a lot. I love good sign, huh? Rage and Ally Quinta. These are awesome. But it's unfortunate to see Weidman because this is his 5th loss in his last 6 fights. Former middleweight champ, known for being the guy that took down one of the greatest of all time, Anderson Silva. Took him down twice in a row, knocked him out, and then he kind of got gypped on that, right? Because he knocked him out in the first fight, and everybody said it was only because, you know, Anderson Silva was messing around, and then the second fight he comes out and checks a low kick, and Anderson Silva's leg snaps, and so nobody really kind of gave him credit. But then he went on to dominate, you know, Lyoto Machida and guys that had been champions in other divisions, and Weidman had a great career, but he went up to light heavy and couldn't get the takedown on Reyes, and once it was standing again, Reyes was just his reach was too much. He timed a left hook real well while Weidman was moving forward and caught him right on the chin. Weidman went down. Reyes finished it with some hammer fists, and it's all she wrote. There's a reason there's weight classes, you know.
So, a kind of a typical UFC main event, right? You get all this hype built into it, and then ends in the first round.
Yeah,
I feel like I've seen that happen a lot of times, you know.
Yeah, for sure. And when you go to that level, there's dudes that are that good, it can go that well for somebody or that wrong for somebody just as easily. You know, it's what people want. You know, most people don't want to watch a 5-round decision that's kind of slow. Me, I like it either way. It doesn't matter, but you know, it's a good way to make a statement if you're Dominic Reyes. You know, he's trying to get a title shot in that division against John Jones, which may be ill-advised, but beating a former title holder, even if it is another weight class, is still a big name on your resume. I don't know who else would be fighting for the title right now. The other guy that a lot of people are talking about, Johnny Walker, I think is scheduled for a fight already. So, you know, if you're looking at it, there's nobody else in that top like 5 or 6 guys that Jones hasn't fought and beat already that doesn't have a fight scheduled. So Dominic Reyes makes sense, especially coming off of a win over a guy who recently fought for the title against Daniel Cormier and Volkan Oezdemir, which some people say he shouldn't have won, but, you know, nevertheless.
Well, I mean, you say a big name on the resume, but it's kind of like, you know, if a guy's lost, like, what, like, however many of his last 5, 6 fights, there's only, like, 1 win in there. I mean, is it really such a big name anymore?
Yeah, I mean, to an extent, no. But I think, you know, a year or 2 down the line, you're still going to look at his resume and go, oh, Chris Weidman, huh? All right. You know, it's, yeah, I still look at Derek Brunson's resume and go, shit, he beat Anderson Silva. You know, even though it was, whatever, you know, years after Anderson Silva was out of his prime, you know, you still look at Daniel Cormier's resume, even though he's one of the greatest light heavyweights and heavyweights of all time, you look at it and you go, damn, he beat Anderson Silva? It's after Anderson Silva's lost a few, he's going up a weight class, but still, the name's on the resume. You know, Weidman's a big name, so having it on your resume is good either way. Even a guy like Diego Sanchez, you know, people still want to fight Diego Sanchez.
Well, we don't need to get in a protracted conversation about this, so we'll just go ahead and end it on this note. You know, we discussed all the fights, hope you had a good time, and we'll have another episode that's going to be previewing an upcoming event, so stay tuned for that, and make sure to like and subscribe. Discussing what happened during that event, so stay tuned. Oh wait, are we not like
5, 4, 3, 2.
So Pat, why don't we get into it first?
Wait a minute, what the fuck am I supposed to do with that? I don't.
Should we just let's just scrap the whole thing.
We gotta
start
start from the beginning. I don't know.
You went into like 3rd and goal mode.